This is Robert Banks reporting for San Andreas News. Nah, I'm just kidding. For real though, I'm Michael. You guys know me as Richard Banks, Robert Banks, that jackass admin. You know the basics. So I'm gonna play some videos in the background while I talk because no one just wants to listen to me talk for 15 minutes. So this is going to be a bit of a long thing. So I do encourage you to try to stick it out to the end. Uh, but I'm going to start off by saying that this also does serve as my resignation and departure from the server as well. So I've been around for a long time. I started back in VG when they were still making the transition from Las Venturas to Los Santos. I've seen people come, I've seen people go, I've seen people rage quit. I've known people who died playing this game and loved every single moment of it. Keep in mind that this is not a monologue. It's not a story, a recount, a dossier, whatever you want to call it, about Owl, but rather it's the entirety of the roleplay scene on MTA. Because guess what? It's been the same community that's been evolving for years. Each new server isn't really a new community, it's a migration. It's essentially a coup when grievances aren't addressed or get out of hand and the player base decide that they've had enough and they support a visionary who they believe will set a basis for gameplay that will allow them to have fun again. So why do I bring this up? It's because I can't see why things continuously go through this cycle of frankly abhorrent treatment. These past years of roleplay on MTA have somehow managed to morph the word community into babysitting. So let's look at an example of this evolution real quick. Back on VG, you were allowed to have the mechanic job. Just anyone could walk into City Hall, you pick up the mechanic job, you go out, you start fixing cars. That was what you did. Okay, this was fine for a long time. And it was not an issue. People abused the privilege, and so there were more restrictions placed on it, on where they could do it. They could only do it in interiors and yada yada. And then it eventually evolved into the system that it is now, where it's a heavily regulated and admin request only job, where if you lose it on one character, you're basically blacklisted from it in a lot of cases. And so then later on, we have the paint job wrap system come in. And this is an amazing system. It allows for a huge level of car customization that just wasn't possible before this system existed. And the issue was that they had already seen that it would be abused by the people role playing these types of scenarios where, painting a car, doing a repair, it's all kind of grouped into one thing. And they already saw that the same people doing that were abusing it one way. So they figured, they'd abuse this as well. Instantly just set to an admin request. And it's like this for a lot of situations. The trust has degraded to essentially nil. And now we see this massive gap between the player base and the admin team where we should just be one community. Most things outside of passive RP now require an admin. If there's a CK, an admin is overseeing. If there's a break-in, there's an admin watching. If there's a PK, usually we get called in to deal with the aftermath and thumb through the logs. These examples continue through a lot of the server, and it's to the point where at peak hours, we can have 12 admins online, on duty, actively answering reports, and we still just cannot keep up. And it's not only because of these repeated violations of trust, creating a feeling of a necessity to limit what the players have access to. It's also that some players simply have an innate inability to resolve their own issues. Many people have an issue and go straight to F2 to request an admin. And yes, that's why we're here. We signed up for that. But those of you who do, in doing so, further the image of the administrator as a caregiver and the player as a helpless child in need of cradling. I'm not trying to say that everyone in the community needs a babysitter, and that's the tragic part of it all. There are more than a few players who have no reason to be put under these stiff regulations that we have set forward based on the history of a misbehaving minority. That's not fair to them. And it's not fair to the admins who have to spend all of that extra time to work on adding paint jobs to cars, overseeing a small RP, transferring items between new players. It is a fundamentally broken system. I'm about to make a distinction that's a result of this flawed system that I really don't like, and I'm classifying the players and the admins. I've harped on a lot on what most people think of as the normal quote unquote playing base or player base. This, however, is not where the problem ends and is not even where it begins. The administration team has evolved with the changing community to create something atrocious. Not only have the current and past teams of OWL and the communities before it propagated this image, they tend to be intent on doing so. Becoming an administrator or staff is no longer about helping people. For those of you who have never tried to apply for a staff position, it asks you what your reason is for trying to join staff. Most people write this drawn out and romanticized, idealistic view of what staff is and so on. When I filled mine out, I was no different. But I truly wanted to be a beacon of light to help new players tell fascinating stories and uncover the wonder that can be unlocked by absorbing yourself into an entire lifetime of experiences all at once. When I moved to be an admin, it's because I truly feel that the word community has a meaning and wanted to be a bridge for disputing people to set aside quarrels and move past disagreements. This is what staff member means to me. And that is what I've tried to be every time I've logged in. The staff team, however, is not that interested in this. Fear has created a brutal bureaucracy that ruthlessly strikes down those who don't abide by the letter of poorly phrased rules and holds the members on a tight leash of threats and disciplinary action. It doesn't matter where this fear comes from. It could be backlash from player opinion. It could be fear of losing power, or any number of other sources. But it has prompted administration to set up walls and become a fortress that is intent on making a clear distinction between themselves and the commoners around them. People often hear horror stories of players abusing admins and such, but what goes on behind the scenes is how admins treat each other, and it's far worse, particularly between the UAT and the GAT. The fact that we are volunteers seems to be lost. We volunteer our time to help and are treated as we've been given a job by a CEO who has disdain for the necessity of our employment. I won't go into detail, but the recent departures and removals, if they aren't an indication of the status of things, I really don't know what else to say. These clips that you've been seeing go across your screen for the past 10 minutes about 10 minutes now, have been footage that I've been able to get in character for just long enough to get the footage, but I've never been able to stay in character long enough to produce a story. These are my backlogs of SAN news stories that just never were. And the reason is that once you're online, you are expected to be on reports. If you take time for yourself to roleplay, you can get infracted. You can be removed because you choose to play the server, even if you are helping players between your role plays, or if you're just role playing between helping players. It's utterly baffling to me that we've gotten to the point where I volunteer my precious few hours to helping players on a game, only to be told that what I'm doing is not enough, and that the staff as a whole will be better off with fewer admins being forced to do more work than retaining admins who still would contribute to the workload, just not in excess. Yes, we've been given expectations when we signed up, but I encourage you to look beyond simply what is presented and look at the reasoning behind the systems that are in place. Because if you look hard enough, you realize that many of the reasonings for the existence of these guidelines don't apply to you. Many of you are intelligent people who don't need babysitters. Many of you are here for the love of roleplay and will continue your story progression through whatever is thrown at you. Many of you are good people who know what is right and know what is wrong. And to all these people included under these categories, I say thank you. You are the reason a community works. You are the reason I wanted to become staff to help. But it's not fair to you. These constructs are not meant to apply to you, and yet you can be punished severely for things that are absolutely insignificant, but exist because someone who didn't care as much as you was here before you. All I can do is urge you to consider these statements. Take them as a load of crap, take them as a gospel, take them as you will, but please realize that this is not a group based on trust as a community should. I don't know what OWL can do to get there, but there must be some way that we can re-solidify the bands of camaraderie and have real respect for each other. There just has to be.